Okay, thank you everyone for joining. Today we are hosting Kimberly. And Kimberly, I didn't ask you this before. Do you go to by Allenby or Blick?
Allenby.
Okay, I met Kim as Blick, and she has been married for quite some time now. And we have known each other for quite some time now, which
Mm-hmm.
always
Mm-hmm.
makes me
We're in
feel old.
decades. Yep.
Yes. um, and so met her in Charlottesville from a mutual friend. And Kim, we were just talking about planning, and she is one of the best hosts that I have ever met. She could really you could really throw a great party.
Thank you.
Yes, it's so thoughtful. All of the touches. I am having my family over for my sister's 40th on Sunday, and I'm trying to channel my inner Kim to
Oh,
make it
love
all look
that.
nice.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Love to hear that. That was me in my pre-kid life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One
Yeah. Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you so much for taking some time today, and I can't wait to hear more about your story.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. What was your expectation of having children when you were growing up, and how did that maybe change over the years?
This isn't one I ever really questioned or thought that much about, honestly. I just always sort of felt maternal on some level, and I just always saw kids in the picture. But I am not super detail oriented when it comes, I'm a Capricorn, I'm a goat, I'm pretty grounded. Like I think about the here and now. So, um, yeah, kids were part of my picture, but I didn't think any more of it. And my husband was fairly similar. So we bonded over that, for better and for worse, only because when it came time to do it, it was like, oh, wow. So what will this look like? In retrospect, maybe we should have talked more about that prior to marriage, but nothing that therapy can't help with later on. So yeah.
And then
I'll,
you're in it, you're
yeah, and
there.
then you're in it and you learn about each other in it. And yeah, it's worked well for us. It's brought us closer, but there's lots that we've navigated and lots of wisdom and things that we've had to just fall into, even if it's not pretty. So yeah.
Okay. With that, when did you and your husband start pursuing pregnancy? And can you walk us through just when you might have suspected there are issues and an overview of your fertility experience?
Yeah, so it was probably maybe 4 years into being married. I got married, I think it was fairly young. I was 25. Michael's about 12 years older than me, so he had lived a life, not ever having been married or had kids or anything like that, but just um, he was much more versed in what he wanted and had had time to sort of develop a career and an identity. And I spent the first couple of years of our marriage doing that for myself, alongside him, and it was, it's great. But yeah, so it took us about 4 years to sort of come around and decide, hey, let's jump in. I think the first thing that was so shocking for me was just that learning to have a baby is. Wow, mind blowing. I didn't learn how in school how to have a baby. I had no idea. And I feel like I'm well educated, I'm smart, I'm quick, but I had to really go to back to the books, and study and really like learn how to conceive. Um, I and maybe because of Michael's age, we took it a bit more seriously from the get-go. And I had really irregular periods my whole life, and I thought maybe I'd had endometriosis. It's not something you can diagnose easily, so didn't put a ton
Mm.
of thought into it. But so I I read the books, I started learning and trying to understand, and it didn't really take at first. I don't know, so probably within the first 6 months, I went just to my OB, which was really less than underwhelming, I would say. And I actually had to I remember in the portal saying to him and correcting him to say, no, I should come on this day for blood work, right? Based on XYZ. Like, and as I look back, and this is the OB that delivered my second baby. He's wonderful. He's amazing at what he does. But in my journey now, I've realized OBs are not the ones that should be coaching us on how to
Mm.
conceive. They have enough going on. Like
Yeah,
they, it is not their specialty to tell us what day we're ovulating when and if your estrogen is this or if your progesterone is like that's just not how their day-to-day flows. They have so
right.
many other things that they're thinking about. So it was underwhelming, and I don't mean that as a knock against him, but it didn't really set me up for success. And that was okay, but it made me sort of again, go back to the books and just keep really studying and learning and trying to understand what was up. So I'd say then within the next 6 months, we went. We're really fortunate in Charlottesville to have an awesome, awesome nationally ranked clinic. It's I refer to it as RMSC. It used to be Reproductive Medicine and Surgery Centers. They've now rebranded to Virginia Fertility. But so I started at Virginia Fertility. One of the founders was, I'd say he's in his early 70s, and he just felt like a dad in the best way. And so I was lucky enough to have him as my main MD. They're all reproductive endocrinologists there, but really fond memories of that. And so we started with him and just started doing the basics, did like the basic workup. This was probably like 9 months into our journey. And just
Okay.
with basic, we did oral meds at first and we did conceive. And when you conceive through, your fertility specialist, you stay with them for the first few weeks. So first 6 week ultrasound was great. 9 week ultrasound went in, unfortunately it was a miscarriage. And,
Okay.
we had no idea, we were, yeah, we were just optimistic and happy about the whole thing. And you walk in and you can just read his face, and it's like, well, crap, it wasn't even on my mind that
Yeah.
maybe this wouldn't pan out. But I feel so fortunate that we had him as our, as our spiritual guide really through all that. I remember the way their office is set up. You finish your ultrasound and you walk across the hall and sort of sit down in, sort of a comfy feeling office with him. And he, it was very stoic and sort of slow and precise. And he closed his door and he sort of, you know, uh, pointed to the chair, and it felt like the most loving environment. And he was like, we have an opening tomorrow at 7 a.m. I'd really suggest you just have a DNC and like, let's move on and just move
Mm-hmm.
forward. And in retrospect, it was just fantastic advice because I had no idea what to do. And there's all different options. I know you've explored miscarriage in some of your other sessions, but um,
Yeah.
that was a great piece of wisdom that I feel fortunate to have had because I could emotionally and physically just sort of move on and sort of grieve and let myself feel all the feels and go through all the motions, but
Yeah.
do it in a safe, sort of structured environment, which worked for me, right? Everybody's different, but that worked well for me. Um, yeah, so that was at week 9. Yeah, jumped into DNC, and then
Okay.
we went for a whole year at that point. It was 12 months of trying and just documenting everything. I think I did it on my own for the first maybe 8 or 9 months. And it's interesting as I wrote all these notes, like these little details that feel so acute and so strong as you're going through any sort of fertility issues or just, trying to conceive, even if it works well, they feel so heavy and so powerful in the moment. And once you're on the other side, it's amazing how they just kind of breeze away. And it really speaks, I think, to once you've come full circle, it's like, oh, wow, this weight that we go through really is heavy, so heavy, but it just suddenly then it's gone and you move on to this next
Yeah.
amazing chapter. But so, point being, I'm trying to go through my notes. I don't even remember the
There's a
details. And
lot.
there's so many. And I had them all charted out because, long story, basically, around this same time, it had been about 9 months of no success, and we decided to go back to fertility. This was in like January of 2020, or it might have been Q4 of 2019.
Were
Yeah, to
you,
your question.
quick question, were
Hmm.
you, so after the miscarriage, did you start trying again right away? Was there any
I
discouragement there, or was
There was
it?
no real
Mm,
discouragement. I mean, they say,
mm,
they sort of by the
yes.
book say 3 months, but I don't think my clinic actually said that. I think it was just
Nice.
kind of like, just listen to your body, do what feels
Yeah.
good. When you get a period, just call us if you want, or just, proceed as you want. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I feel really lucky to have had that as my sort of medical and spiritual coaching because
Right.
they set us up for success, which was awesome. Yeah, so I'd say about 9 months after our DNC, it was like, I guess, Q4 of 2019. And at that point, we went back to fertility and started doing heavier meds, like progressively stronger attempts leading into IUIs, and then progressively stronger IUIs. I think we ended up doing 3. And the third one was sort of the most medicated. We did some injections, we did gonal to see if we could drop extra eggs. None of that worked. I remember the biggest one was January of 2020. And when I say the biggest, it was a big financial commitment. And we
Mm,
even threw a whole acupuncture package at it. And so we had that,
okay.
hundreds of dollars in acupuncture sessions, just really sort of going all in. And it was, to me, I thought this is our last ditch attempt until we go to IVF. not that I was opposed to IVF, it has always felt very intimidating from the outside, right? I just was always
Right.
taught to think, wow, those are big numbers, right? Like don't even think about that, right? That's not um yeah, I had no opposition, like I said, but just it was intimidating, it was scary. But at the same time that all this was happening, I work for a small business, and so I helped negotiate our insurance plans. And there was one other coworker of mine who was having similar fertility issues, and we were able to negotiate an IVF rider for our coverage, which was going to start then in March 2020, at the beginning of our new plan year. So that
Awesome.
felt like a breath of fresh air. And
Right.
all you had to do basically was prove we've tried for 12 months, which I was already mapping, right,
You
neurotically in a
do,
Google
you
in a
have
Google
all
sheet.
of the
I had all the
details.
details. I had all the things, day by day, seriously, unfortunately. And so it felt like a breath of fresh air in a way, where it was like, oh wow, this thing that has felt scary and intimidating might actually be achievable, and hey, it might help because nothing else is working at this point, right? Yeah, then the world shut down in March 2020. We had at that point sort of decided to do IVF. And I remember being on a Google video call from home because that was how we conducted business. And I checked my email personally, and it was from the fertility clinic saying, wow, IVF is resuming. And I remember just like, exclaiming to everybody on this work call, like, oh my gosh, I can start. I think it was May 2020 at that point, or April, I guess. And so we just jumped right in. Um, and the rest is history from there. I took really well to IVF, and I have 7 more babies on ice. And the first one that we transferred took, and thank God,
That's awesome.
God was good. Whatever, it worked well for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah,
That is a long, so I mean,
yeah.
start to finish, that is a
I'd say it
decent
was like
chunk of
two
time,
years.
right?
Yeah, 2.5 years.
And um a lot of meds in there, a lot of tracking.
hmm I
How did the
think it was
process?
over 52 appointments to fertility was what I ended up
Oh my
tracking.
goodness.
And much of that was IVF, right? Because you go like almost daily at the end for
Right.
monitoring and stuff. But, if we
Which
did, let's say we did 5 or 6 medicated cycles prior to that. So you're dropping in constantly for blood work and stuff. So it was a lot.
how I mean, how did that affect your emotions throughout? You are a very let's see, like
Yeah. How are
practical,
you
I
going to
think,
phrase it?
person. It's like you're a very practical person, right? You're like, here's the
Yeah.
solution, here's what we're doing, right?
I like the if this then this scenario, right? It's
Yeah,
if
right.
if I have sex on this day and I have a 48-hour window per the textbook, then this should happen, right?
Yes.
And when it doesn't happen, that is incredibly frustrating, right? It really sort of knocks you over. And I like to think I'm somebody who's open, and I think I've become more open as I've gotten older. And I like to talk. I like the support that comes with that sense of connection and authentic connection. I like to feel like I'm wearing my emotions on my sleeve. But what's been interesting to me is that with fertility struggles, it's a double-edged sword to do that. I do remember after my DNC reaching out to a girlfriend who had the exact same thing happen within 3 or 4 weeks of each other. And she got pregnant, the 2 months
Mm,
after the DNC. And I just remember, a couple months in, my period came, and I sat on the back deck and I was sort of crying and just, having a moment to myself. And I texted her to reach out, right? Because that's what we all want to do, or we think we want to do, is to
yes.
reach out for that support. And I just remember feeling extra heavy when she said, "Oh, we just did XYZ and it just happened." It's so,
Yeah.
yeah, these struggles are really, they really make you stop and meditate on like what's right, because we want that sense of connection with people. And usually I think that support is healthy, but um, there's some aspect of fertility struggles where I think sometimes you want to bat down the hatches and keep to yourself because it is more important for your sanity. But also
Mhm.
that is isolating, right? So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I ultimately ended up going on to meds. I did SSRIs, and that was helpful. That came after I started really heavily gardening, and we had bought a home in 2018, and so I started sort of landscaping, and I joke, basically, I threw myself into pulling out a bunch of landscaping that, unbeknownst to me, had been ridden with poison ivy. And so the
Okay.
spring, the spring after my miscarriage, I would come home from work and I just would dig up all these vines, and I was wearing shorts, and there was one aspect that was like a big hill behind my house. And so I was kind of like laying in it. I ended up going to the doctor weeks later. It was the worst case of poison ivy he's ever
Oh
seen.
my
I had to
goodness.
go on steroids. I almost had burns all over. And it wasn't, there was no greenery. Hey, things we learn, right? I guess the ivy or the
Yeah,
poison ivy
interesting.
can stay on the roots for, I think, up to 7 years. So I was in it. And so, hey,
Oh man.
that was part of my therapy. Didn't help me get pregnant, but yeah, I ended up
But you
going on
worked out some.
antidepressants. I was in great shape, the best shape
Uh-huh.
I'd been in, which was even more frustrating that I couldn't get pregnant, right? Because I was doing all the
Yeah.
things. I was in nature. I was just being peaceful. I was really connecting with earth and my body and just all the things, right? They're supposed to make you calm and at ease and set you up for success in this baby making world. Yeah, that didn't work. So, hey, each person's different. But SSRIs helped me calm down and just kind of find some inner peace again. And that's no shame in that for me. Again, everybody's
Right.
different. But yeah, so that's how it worked for me because the connection with people was not helping. It was making it
Yeah,
worse. Yeah.
that
So,
makes sense.
yep.
Um, the other thing you mentioned was books, and I was curious if you had one or two recommendations. I say that because Aaron did recommend one of your favorite books, I think, to me.
Oh,
So I'm,
it starts with the
yeah,
egg.
I'll start exactly.
It starts with the egg is the Bible, especially for IVF specifically, but I think for anybody who's trying to conceive a healthy baby, it teaches you what's good in this world, what's not, what helps, what sets your body up to produce an egg, and how you can actually impact that. The same
Yeah.
coworker of mine who was struggling with fertility, I gave her that book, and she went from having I think one egg at a retrieval to maybe 7 or 8 healthy ones. And this is for
Wow.
somebody who really it was an uphill battle. I mean, that book it works, the vitamins and
Yeah,
the things they work. And that's also where I look back, the OB doesn't know that that's not their specialty. They're not coaching you in that. So really
definitely.
knowledge is power and studying, learning, just doing as much as you can to empower your own education about all of this stuff is really, really important. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it starts with the egg is a good one.
What I appreciated too is I think, like, yes, it helps with healthy eggs, but it also helps with life. And I think some of that stuff
Yes.
is, I was
Yeah.
telling my husband, which he may or may not totally agree with me on, but like the amount of chemicals that we put in our
Uh,
bodies. So if there's something that's fragrance free, like let's get it fragrance free.
Endocrine disruptors are the energy. And what's fascinating is they're banned in every other country, but they're not here. So
Yeah,
I'm not. I won't even comment too much because I'm not the best versed in all of this. But in my gut and in my core, I just know there's so much about America and regulation here that is just
yes,
working against us.
and not
And
setting
it's
us up.
really
Like,
yes, and especially once you have a baby, you start really paying attention to a lot of that. Our skin is our biggest organ, for example. So think about all the lotion that we put on, and all
hmm.
of that gets absorbed and then goes through in breast milk. So the most uh, yeah, the most non-toxic you can be, the best. You're setting everybody up for success if you can do that. So
Agreed.
yeah,
Okay, so what can you talk about the difference between IVF and conceiving naturally, both from a
yeah,
physical and mental perspective?
yeah. So part of what we didn't touch on, I guess I gave you the high level of my whole journey, but IVF took really well for us. We had our first baby girl in April of 2021. And then about I don't know, 12 or 14 months later, we said, okay, let's gear up, and do another transfer, sort of for that hashtag 2 under 2 that so many people are doing. Let's have them like 2 years apart, right? That's a whole other issue in my mind. But that was sort of I don't know, our goal. It just seemed right. Our first baby was a COVID baby. We were so peaceful at home, just so calm and confident in what we were doing. And it was amazing. We can talk more about that later. But we jumped in to have a second baby, and for a couple of reasons, after I started, I'd gone to maybe 2 appointments at Virginia Fertility, and then we pulled back. My mom had cancer, and we just said, like, let's this timing isn't quite right. And I think maybe it was that second appointment when I went and we did some blood work. And long story short, I got a phone call, and I go so frequently, right? I knew all the nurses, and one of them
Right.
said to me, she said, "Are you sitting down?" And I was like, "Oh dear God." She said, your HCG is 15,000. So you're either like pregnant with triplets or like you're 7 weeks pregnant. And I said to her, Christy, like, there's no way. What are you talking about? Like, there's no way. And granted, we hadn't been using protection because yes, hey, we're sound adults. It was like, we'll be fine if we get pregnant again.
Right.
And there's no way we would because we didn't for all those months, right? Like, give me
Right.
my money back for all the Plan B I took in college or what, all that birth control, right? Like, I was all BS because I couldn't get
Yes.
pregnant anyway. That's how I felt. So we were blessed enough to conceive naturally, and it was effing terrifying because after you've had
Yeah.
this sort of specially medically concocted, healthy, safe pregnancy where you are medically supplementing your womb for the first 13 weeks. I did a progesterone shot every day for the first 13 weeks
Okay.
to, help this embryo build and grow and connect to my body. We had opted for genetic testing. To me, it was like, if we're going to do this, we might as well do it. So we had done the basic sort of blanket testing. So we knew that all of the embryos would be healthy. And I guess bigger context there is that my miscarriage was a genetic issue. It was Turner
Okay.
syndrome, I believe. So, we'd had that. And so I just thought, hey, let's build in this extra level of security and just sanity because really there's so many questions in the world. And especially after having had this genetic issue, it was like, let's try and just protect from that
Let's
if we
take that off
can
the
and just
table. Yeah.
take it off the table. Yeah, throw a couple more, dollars at it and just do it because if that helps in the long run, it's healthy for everybody. So, um, yes, so shocker when we conceived naturally for all the obvious reasons. But what was the scariest thing to me was just this level of fear that something would go wrong just constantly. And I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
that the first pregnancy, and it was really jarring, and it still is to this day. Just yeah, how scary and different it is. And part of me, as I was making my notes for this, I thought, maybe the fear is also stronger the second time around for anybody because the first time, at least speaking for myself, you walk in and it's sort of like you have rose colored glasses. Like I walked into that 20-week anatomy scan and I didn't really know anything about what that was. I just thought, great, we get to see our baby. But then you understand this amazing level of detail that they're able to see, and they're looking to make sure that there's 4 chambers of the heart, like that everything is
Mm-hmm.
developed. And it's only when you see them doing that you go, oh wow, there's a lot of room for error here. So perhaps walking in the second time, I just was also more scared because I knew what to expect. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a combination of things, but basically I actually found in my second pregnancy, I just was a lot more anxious, um, up until about that halfway point. And then I felt more secure after doing that anatomy scan and seeing all the
Yes.
things and all the bits and everything was healthy. But yeah, it was surprising to me, but hard to pinpoint if that was because of natural conception versus just the second time around knowing what's coming.
Yeah.
So
Did you go on progesterone the second? So once they told you 7 weeks you were pregnant. Did you continue to get progesterone shots? Or
nope, I
okay.
didn't do any of that. No, because I
Yeah.
wasn't at that point. I really wasn't under their care. Like I had
Okay.
been under their care for those first 2 high-level intro appointments just to get my levels
Right.
checked and so that we could make a plan to do a second embryo transfer. But it was just Christy calling me saying, "Wow, you're pregnant. Like call your OB." And actually, my OB was so busy they couldn't see me until 12 weeks. So I had this extra level of fear of sitting there
So
and
then you're
going,
just
"What if
sitting there with it, right?
I've already had a genetic miscarriage?" You know what? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's crazy to me just how sort of nonchalant all of this all of this is, from the medical standpoint. It just so I had to sit there for another 5 weeks and just again, like thank God everything was fine, but it just
Yeah.
felt odd to me that there was this huge gap in care of like nobody wanted. I couldn't step foot in. They didn't have an intro
Uh,
appointment for me until week 12, and at that point, a lot of people have already gone 3 or 4 times. So.
yeah. Well, and
Mhm.
especially too, I imagine when you for the first one because you were under their care, you were going so often,
All the
right?
time. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I had a lifeline, which to me in healthcare is very important.
Yeah,
I
that's really
prefer to
nice.
have one person that I'm working with, so that I can pick up a phone and just feel like I have somebody to call if I'm terrified,
Yeah,
right?
bounce
So
something off of, talk you off the ledge. Mm-hmm.
yes, yeah, or just to feel like I have, yeah, like there's somebody
Yeah.
there. Yeah. So yeah,
Okay. So you mentioned your first kiddo. Now, what is her name?
Libby.
Libby. Okay, so Libby
Yep.
was born during COVID.
Hmm.
I would imagine in some ways that's a really lovely time to have a
Oh
baby
my God, it
because
was
it was
amazing. Yeah,
quiet and you
it
could
was
really
amazing.
spend
Yeah,
great time with her.
it made I look back so fondly on that first postnatal period. I just felt so centered and so calm. And there's something amazing about having kids that just makes you feel like you can just be present at home and be present with them and just sort of cut out the world in a nice way, right? It's like we
Yeah.
can put on blinders and just turn off the noise and just be present and focused. And it was such a breath of fresh air just to sit there and feel like we were living this new world, and it just was calm and peaceful. And yeah, I really think fondly about those days. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, this is our little world. This
Yeah.
is
Oh, it was
us.
wonderful. Yeah. And you're
Mhm.
learning everything new, and just to be able to do that without disruptions and without people coming in and out, and just to be focused.
Right.
And
No one wants
yeah.
to come visit you. No one's forcing themselves in there. It's
No, I
gonna
know.
be
That's I
nice.
had a lot of friends say to me, prior to us giving birth, saying, "Wow, it's amazing having babies during COVID in the hospital because you don't have to deal with visitors." And I had never thought about it. I didn't know. I again, like I just kind of figured you have a baby and a couple people come visit and whatever. But wow, how amazing that we could sit there for those 48 hours and just feel like we were in the most sort of supported little nest and like safe with this little baby, and free from interruptions or distractions or whatever. So, double-edged sword, of COVID. But
Yeah.
yeah, it also for us, it taught us, it allowed us to understand what we liked and what we needed. So when we had our next baby, we just kind of knew like we're going to do this a certain way, and we're going to put up these boundaries because that's healthy for us as a family, and that's what we need right now. So,
Yeah. So
mhm.
how was having the second kiddo? And how old was Libby when your second kiddo was born?
Yeah, so they are 22 months apart, and
Okay.
wow, for me, the transition from 1 to 2 was really difficult, really difficult.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not sure if it was because going from 0 to 1 was during COVID, where we were in this little protected bubble, or if that's how we would have been anyway, right? It's hard to say.
Hmm.
But going from 1 to 2 was amazing and just so challenging because that sense of sitting and being present with a baby just felt different. And for me, I really, my favorite part of parenting is just being able to sit and be totally connected and totally immersed with my kids, free from anything. Like I'm not, I mean, I'm terrible on email now. I'm terrible on text, and it's a trade off. But I love the trade off because that means to me I'm present with my kids. I don't like to be on my phone when I'm around them. I want to watch them and
Yeah.
observe them, and engage with them and connect with them because that's why they're here. They're awesome, right? Like that is they learn by those connections, and I learn, and that is my favorite thing about parenting. And it still is, but it was really hard for me to split my time a lot, when our second born came. And yeah, I've learned a lot about myself through that challenge, but I don't do well being pulled in different directions. So that was the hardest thing when you've,
You're
22
definitely pulled
months
in
of
different
separation.
directions.
Yeah, yeah. And just physically when you're sitting nursing a baby. I mean, I have photos, I was nursing him, holding him on my boob, holding her hand, walking down the street half naked, in our neighborhood, because that's just how it worked. I wanted to be with
Right.
them, but that was how I had to do it. That's how it looked.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, no regrets. It's just, wow, what a learning experience. And for us too, it was Libby broke her collarbone when Liam was 12, or sorry, when Liam was, yeah, was 12 days old. So
Oh
that
wow.
was, there was sort of an extra level of trauma in there. And we don't have a lot of immediate family support. So it was just us. And Michael and I, our split has been input and output in the early days. So I am responsible for input. I feed the babies, I do all that. He deals with the output. So it's like in the middle of the night,
I like
this
that
works.
structure.
Input output. Yeah, I that has worked for us. But I need a lot of sleep. He doesn't. So I would nurse, and when you're nursing a little baby, sometimes it's 45 minutes a session. So in the middle of the night, I would do that. Get right in bed, hand him the baby, and he would deal with the output, change the diaper, get the kid back down. Right. So that was our
Okay.
vibe. That all went away, because with a broken collarbone at 22 months, it's sleep is tough. So he actually ended up co-sleeping with her in her room. So
Oh,
so it's hard to parse out anything about that postnatal period the second time around, just because
there
there
are a
were a
lot of
lot of
different
different
factors.
variables going on. But that
Hmm.
is also life, right? So we're all going to have that. There's
Right.
people change jobs. I remember my sister was, I think, 8 or 9 months, maybe not that late, but in her third trimester when she changed jobs. So, meaning like she delivered a baby and came out and then just had to like jump back in and start a new job, right? So, there's always all these different variables. That's life. Who knows? And that's what teaches us about ourselves and about all these things we're trying to achieve. But it's not always pretty along the way. There were
Yeah.
a lot of tears when suddenly it was like, wait, we had this great workflow in the middle of the night. Like, holy, oh my gosh, I'm not sure I can do it. And I did. I hired a night
Right.
nurse one night, and actually, it didn't work. I didn't love it for me. Just, I think you either have sort of like full time care and help, or to me personally, it was harder to hand off a baby for a couple hours because the time it took to explain the rhythm and everything, I didn't end
It
up
was
getting
easier to
much
do
more
it
sleep.
yourself, and
It was easier to do it
exactly.
myself. Yeah. And she was awesome. But, she had to get up and out at 6 a.m. And for me, it was like, well, then I still have to set my alarm for 5 something. And that's
Yeah.
not, to me, that's not restorative. So, but again, things we learn. So,
Hmm.
yeah, such is life. Yep.
A lot of trial and error and figuring
Hmm.
it out. I love
A
that.
lot of trial and error.
Now, how old is Liam now then?
17 months.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
He's
Can you,
awesome.
you mentioned breastfeeding and
Yeah.
walking and breastfeeding at the
Yeah.
same time. So
Yeah. Breastfeeding is
what was your
amazing.
what was your experience with breastfeeding and hormones within that?
Yeah, breastfeeding is amazing. It is awesome. If you can do any element of it, we all know it's healthy, but I also just think there's something really amazingly empowering about that. One thing I noticed was let me think about how to phrase all this. So we talk about skin to skin now, and I'm not sure if this was a thing even in our parents'
Mm,
age, right? But it's like there's all this emphasis on skin to skin and just the hormones that are supposed to come with that contact. So with Libby, I did sit and I breastfed her a lot, and so we had that really close bond physically. With Liam, my letdown was so fast that he would choke, and so I
okay.
and that was, I tried that for the first 4 weeks, and we also had all these other variables going on, like I just said. So I ultimately couldn't spend the time to sort of reteach my body to let down differently or to have him drink differently. So I ended up just pumping exclusively and feeding him bottles. And in that, I realized, in looking back, like, I think my hormones were just really unstable for those first couple months because we weren't getting that skin to skin contact,
Yeah.
interestingly enough. So, um, yeah, uh, point being, let me think about this. There is a lot, nobody talks about what happens as you're making milk and then as you stop, right? So I ended up stopping
Right.
around 6 or 7 months with him. And I wish that I was better versed in the medical aspects of all this because I just haven't had a chance to do all that research. But wow, that hormone drop is real, and that impacted my
Interesting.
marriage and my daily interactions. And it's real. There were tears. There were so many feels. There was such anxiety and such angst, and you can't control it. And I think then that makes you
Yeah.
anxious and uneasy. And that's just our body doing its thing. But, it takes 9 or 10 months for all of these hormones to build. And then suddenly you just want to cut them off, to stop pumping, to stop nursing, to stop making milk. And it's intense. It's, physically, you get a lot of the same symptoms that you get when your milk comes in. So it's physically uncomfortable, which can also, make us all anxious and just uneasy
Mm-hmm.
and angsty and whatnot. But when you ask your body to stop, there's this huge, really fast drop in hormones, comparable, I think, to when you deliver a baby. It's just this huge hormonal drop.
Yeah.
Um, but nobody really talks about that. And I think that there should be more support around that, just from friends or family or medical, the medical team. It's just like, yeah, just check on people and make sure they're okay, because really it's huge. It really is. And it's that those hormones really affect your mental health and your outlook. And
Now, did you experience the same with Libby or with Liam? Was it because it was a faster drop?
I think with Liam, it was a faster drop. There was just
Right.
more going on. It was harder to keep up pumping and wanting to be present with my 2 year old
Right.
and working full time, and then being also with, a younger baby. So it was a faster drop. And I think for me,
That
it
makes
hit
sense.
much harder. And so
Hmm.
that also, I mean, my body just stopped making milk basically because I was so strung out. I would pump, and then I would, as you get into this, you can sort of trick your body into producing more by pumping more, because it sort of
Thinks that
imitates the effect of your
it
baby
gives it
nursing.
more.
Yes,
Right.
it thinks it needs more. Right. My body wasn't responding. I went from making like 30 ounces a day to 6, and so
Oh, wow.
nothing could help it. And so that unto itself was just scary. And then
Yeah.
it all sort of cycles out from there. But there was never anything wrong, right? It was like everything was okay. It was hard and scary to navigate
But
at once.
naturally it drops, right?
It drops. The other thing that was sort of happening in this whole time was like having had a COVID baby the first time, Libby was never around other kids really, or she was in limited healthy exposures because that was the only way you saw people is
Right.
everybody had to be healthy and or it was outside or blah, blah, blah. So germs were limited. And then suddenly when we had the second baby, she was beginning a preschool program,
Oh,
and so we then suddenly had to deal with, a toddler who was navigating illnesses for the first time ever, and then a baby who was navigating illnesses. And we weren't equipped to deal with either because we hadn't had any practice with our first baby. So all that happened in the midst of, crazy hormone drops and, bodies stopping making milk. And again, like everybody was fine. There was no real problem, but it's just a lot to navigate. And I think a lot of people don't quite get that. I often say to people, uh, reach back out basically like months after. Like you'll understand. I think
yeah.
right after you have your baby, you're gonna have this huge influx of people reaching out, and everybody's well intentioned. I want to advise you, unsolicited advice, tell them like please reach out in 4 weeks because that's when things get real. It's just kind of
Right.
when you get into your daily rhythm, like that's sometimes when you need the break. It's not right away because your endorphins are still going. You still have all the adrenaline. It's those first couple of weeks, our bodies are programmed to carry us and make the best things happen for us and for our babies. But it's afterwards when you kind of settle down and you take that deep breath, like 4 or 6 weeks after, and you go, wow, like I could use a little support right now, or I could use a hug, or I could use some dinner.
Right.
So yeah, and so I just that's one thing I'd love for like everybody to understand is just like reach back out later, check in
Mm-hmm.
on people later because those hormones, everything just kind of settles and it's beautiful and messy and it's just yeah, like just that's when we really should be there for each other. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so let's see. You talked about your favorite part of parenting in all of this. One other thing
Yeah.
that is a little unique to your situation is you are the working parent in your household. So, how have you and Michael navigated this, and what have been some of your challenges alone and then with him?
Yeah, that was sort of another side effect or symptom or aftermath of COVID was just he was in the artist management and festival production business, and a lot of that sort of went away, right, with COVID, or he tried to pivot his business model and it just didn't make sense. And then we had a baby and we thought, why don't you just take care of the baby, And then um, everything was beautiful and peaceful with with just one, and then life changes a lot when you have two. You're suddenly gridlocked in a whole different way, as the caregiver,
Mm-hmm.
because one's sleeping, one's not, and I'm very rigid with naps and things, and that's what works for us. And we have kids that are great sleepers, but it's a double-edged sword, as so many things are, because we
Right.
are nap trapped constantly, or we are, stuck in rhythms that are dictated by our kids' schedules. And I didn't think I would be that kind of parent, but that has worked for my mental health and for my sanity, is kind of knowing what to
Right.
expect. And within that, of course, we pivot at times. But to me, we are most successful when we know what to expect. And honestly, our kids have taken well to it. So whatever, everybody's different, works for us. But point being, when we went from one to two, I was still working full time as the breadwinner, and Michael was still the sole caregiver, but it became way more isolating for him. He could no longer really easily go out and grab a coffee with friends and with the one baby because it's just a whole
Right.
new thing to juggle too. So his mental health really took a hit from that. I don't even think he quite realized it at the time. So, there's factors like resentment that build, and one thing we always kind of bickered about was like, he would say to me, well, I don't understand. Like, you get 30 minutes alone in the car every day. Like, you don't understand how liberating that must be, from my perspective. And I would say, there's nothing liberating about that. I'm sitting there, I'm usually on the phone or I'm prepping for work or like that. To me, that did never feel like a break,
Yeah.
so oftentimes it became sort of my word against another person's word. We've had to learn to navigate a lot
Mm-hmm.
of these things. There's resentments that come. They just do. You'll never quite understand how the other person feels because you're not the one there every day. He doesn't know what it feels like to be in my shared office every day where yes, I'm away from kids, but I have people constantly interrupting me and it is incredibly draining. And I'm trying to apply myself And, the other thing is that these constructs of like mom guilt and mom responsibilities, they are real, even if they're just constructs. Like that pressure of being the mom doesn't stop. I carry that
Right.
mental weight. I carry it at, whether I'm working or not. And I happen to be the one working, but uh, it, we can't trade that basically. Like him suddenly being the primary caregiver, he doesn't get that
He
mental
doesn't get
weight.
the mom guilt.
It doesn't go with him. No. And it's so fascinating to me.
Mhm.
So here's my example is I left the office one day to meet him. Pediatricians are cool and they often will like, book both kids in one appointment because they understand that's how, parents have to function. So I think both kids had one checkup in the same appointment. So I thought, hey, like, let me make the effort. I'll like leave the office. I want to be there. He was so like flustered and busy getting them out the door. He didn't bring shoes for the kids. So I get to the office. I'm like, where are our kids' shoes? I think that from the outside, and again, this is just me, maybe nobody else even cared, but as a mom, I'm like, oh my God, people are going to think poorly of us. Like people are going to think that we're not
Right.
raising our kids well,
They'll judge
and
us.
and they'll judge us or they'll judge me. If
Right.
it's just you, Dad, they're going to say, "Great job, Dad! Like great job getting your kids out the door. You did what you could. Great job. Oh, how does it feel to be babysitting today? Where's Mom? What's she doing?" I mean, if it's me like that, people would look at me like I'm in a third world country. It's like it's
Right. Like, what
those
are you
double
doing over
standards.
there?
They are real. But no, good job, Dad. You got your kids out the door. Like great, good work. It's those double standards are real, and I don't know how to navigate it. I don't know what the answer is. It just so happened that our life ended up this way for the time being. I'm the breadwinner. But what's been really isolating is that we have very few people who are in this same scenario. So
Yeah.
parenting really young kids is isolating enough, right? It's you just by nature are often alone and you just lose a lot of the connections or you put them on pause. We will come back. We will be real people again, but you have to sort of pause your normal life as you've known it. And that's
Definitely.
okay. That's the amazing thing about parenting, right? But I didn't realize quite how isolating it would be ending up as a female breadwinner. I don't have a lot of my friends are working moms, yes, but nobody has the same pressure of being the
Right.
only one financially contributing. And there's nothing bad, everything like it's fine. Like we live a great life. It's okay. But there is this extra level of isolation and pressure of being that breadwinner and having the mom guilt and all the things and two kids under two. It's just a lot. So
That is a
I don't
lot.
know. Yeah. Yes.
And it and it is
Yep.
different because I think just in talking with moms, your children are such a big part of your life, right? But then you have this other piece that's also a big part of your life, and this other pressure that's a big part
Totally. Whether
of
you
your life.
work
And
full time or not, once you come out as a parent, you have to figure out what your identity is and just sort
right,
of you have to relearn yourself and in any aspect. We're all contributing, we're all working full time, whether it's for somebody or for our kids or for whatever. We're all fully
right.
engaged all the time, and you end up having to kind of reintroduce yourself to the world and get to know yourself again. And it's awesome and it's amazing, it's really empowering, but it's a process for sure. There's nothing easy about
Mm-hmm.
it. Yeah, and then you add another kid or or whatever, or you don't, but or I imagine, or if you don't, then that is also an identity because people are always going to be saying, when's the next one coming, right? It's like, so you're
Yeah.
constantly, there's always these things to navigate, always. And that's again, it goes back to like the double-edged sword of being open and communicating, because sometimes you just don't want those questions, you don't want those solicitations,
Right.
oh, when's the next one coming, but you also want to be able to connect with people and communicate. And yeah, I don't know
It's a
what the answer
balance.
is. It's a balance.
Um, you've talked a lot about communication. I love how open you are about you and Michael, and like the fact that you've gone to counseling. Have you found counseling helpful in all of this?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, we've worked with the same person. We started probably 3 or 4 years into our marriage ahead of having kids, just, learning to navigate family values, family boundaries, just our
Right.
own. Yeah. The age difference, me sort of coming into my own, Michael being his own person, just having help navigating all that. We didn't do any sort of premarital counseling, which in retrospect, I think is pretty amazing as a practice because you end up getting to know somebody really well and getting to know yourself ahead of being married. Um, so we ended up just doing it later. It was a bit more costly, but that's okay. It was an investment into the
Worth it.
um, worth it. Yeah. And for us, it was also neat that this person we sought out locally became somebody we could go back to. And so he knew our history, he knew all of the dynamics. And so we've sought him out probably 3 or 4 times for, chunks of sessions
Right.
as life has thrown us curveballs. And he's also worked with me a bit, one-on-one, like with infertility. I remember going to him and just sort of struggling and venting. And so just having somebody who we could connect with was really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Again,
awesome to
like it
have a
doesn't
consistent
solve things.
voice.
Yeah, it doesn't
Hmm.
ever solve things, but just feeling like you have that support person who gets it is just really, yeah, it takes the weight off when you need it.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah,
can draw out maybe something that the two of you together don't necessarily draw out. It's a
definitely. Yeah, good point.
circumstance.
Yep,
Hmm.
good point.
Okay, the other thing, you're such a wealth of knowledge on all of this. So the other subject I want to touch on is you still have a desire to gift, the blessing of a baby to someone else. So could you talk more about surrogacy and
Yeah,
why you have, decided to pursue this or thought about it?
yeah. So I'm currently working to be a surrogate. We have a specific family that we're working with. We didn't end up going through an agency. Long story. I love being pregnant. I feel super connected with myself. I feel very centered. I find that in this really busy world, I don't often, this is my personality flaw, I don't often take time to do the basics for myself like I should. And I know rationally I should take a walk, I should exercise every day. I know all these things, but when you're working, when you have kids, when you are organizing a house, meal planning, grocery shop, all these things, and like that,
Right.
I come last, and I love the responsibility of having to do all these other things. Like that is part of what makes me tick. But there's that 2 or 3% of needing to take care of me that I'm not always great about. And one thing I've learned via pregnancy is that carrying a baby makes me do those things for myself. I will take a walk at work, not that anybody would ever stop me or judge me for doing that in a normal non-pregnant setting, but I will make a point to do it every day. And I think I'm healthier and I'm a better person and a better mom for it. All that being said, I just also love being pregnant. My body took to IVF really easily. And if we aren't desiring to add a third baby to our family at this point, but I am desiring to be pregnant again. I'm not a religious person. I just really feel a calling to do this. I can't explain it. It's sort of as close perhaps to being religious as I've ever felt. Just, I really feel driven, and there's something that's compelled me to do it for probably ever since my first pregnancy. I think actually I remember sitting on the back deck when Libby was a little baby and just saying, wow, like I can't wait to do this again. I really can't. And that was a tough labor and delivery. So I'll tell you, you just get through whatever God gives you, and it's like, yeah, you get to the other side, and
And then you black
and
it out and you go on.
you do, and then Liam literally just popped out, and it was the best thing ever, and it was amazing. It was like, and I can't wait to do it again. So it just,
I love
um,
that.
yeah, we get all the full spectrum of all the feels, and yeah, so the one thing about surrogacy too is, like I've said, I love connecting with people. And because we didn't go through an agency, I've been actually working really closely with a woman, and it has been amazing just having this whole new way to connect with somebody over fertility
Right.
and the gift that is life, and just all the values and things that come with that. Because as we all can imagine, a lot of the questions and things that you have to navigate with surrogacy are heavy. And so it's been actually really rewarding, and I've enjoyed it more than I had any idea that I would, to have a personal connection with somebody, and to pick up the phone and just talk about what if this happens, or what if that happens, or
Yeah.
just a lot of the things, even that, in retrospect, like Michael and I could have had some of those conversations about our own kids. God forbid I end up on life support. What happens, if I'm pregnant? We never talked about that for our own baby. I didn't know that could even be an option,
That
right?
that
I
was
was
it.
just
Right.
naive.
That's a
Yeah, I don't know.
conversation.
I just, yeah. So it has been just very personally enriching on a lot of levels. And so, God willing, we'll hopefully have a baby for this family, in the next year. Hopefully my body takes well to IVF again, and we'll figure it out from there. But yeah, so we're in the the final legal stages, but we've been working with them since
Okay.
about January. It's a nine months so far. So
That's awesome. And
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
really that is talking about personal connection. That's a really cool way to talk and connect, especially within her infertility, because you're both working together for this one thing, right?
totally. Yep,
So
yep, yep,
that's
yep.
an awesome gift. I
Yeah,
love that.
so more to come on that down the road, but yeah, keep the rest under wraps for now. But yeah, we're excited and just really thrilled to be able to do that for somebody. So yeah,
Awesome.
yeah,
Well, thanks, Kim, so much for your time. It is lovely chatting. To close it out, we'll ask like two final questions. When you look at all of your experience, what would you say you're most grateful for? And then what are words of encouragement or maybe a piece of advice or um, just words that you're prompted to give to those listening?
yeah. I think that all the challenges that come with infertility have made me just connect with myself so intimately. Um, and I am so hugely grateful for that. I've gotten to know myself and what makes me tick just in a whole different wavelength. And that I think in turn has been like the gift that keeps on giving. It only gets harder in the best way, right? It's like it's every new day is a new challenge, for better or
Yes.
for worse. And that's amazing. And I think that all these struggles of infertility have made me learn to tune out the noise and just really listen to myself. And that's something that I've continued to turn to through all of the issues and struggles and, blessings
It's
that
super
have
valuable.
come. Yes, super
Hmm.
valuable. And so I think probably my words of advice would be like, do what you can to connect with yourself because you are your own best friend through all of this. And, do what you can to learn how to tune out the noise and just navigate this and be driven by you and by what makes you tick. Because at the end of the day, that's what's most important. Does that make
Right.
sense?
And that's what you can control, right? And that's what you're
Yeah, that's
accountable
what you
for
can
at the end of the
control. Yeah.
day.
And so
Hmm.
figure out, yeah, how best that sits with you or what that looks like. But you and your partner are what matter most. And, yep, tune out the noise and just listen to what drives you, and what works for you. And that is something
I
you will
love that.
continue to come back to. Yeah, that is what will help you through everything. Parenting challenges, marriage challenges, they're going to happen. That's what this is. That's the beauty of what life is. So, yeah, yep, yep, yep. Figure out how to navigate it together and tune out the noise.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Kim, so much for joining. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was great. I really enjoyed it. All right, we'll
Yeah.
talk soon.